Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. By now, I hope you know the deal. This is Road to Atlanta. Blaine and I, Blaine Gilmer over there, SI's recruiting coordinator at dogsdaily.com. We get on here every Tuesday night, 9:15, to break down each one of Georgia's opponents on their road to Atlanta. Hence the name. So tonight has been one of our more highly anticipated shows, Blaine, and it's the most highly anticipated football game of the season. Not just of Georgia's schedule, but I mean, you can honestly make the case and have a good one that it's the most highly anticipated college football game of this fall. And it's October 17th when Georgia heads to Tuscaloosa for the first time since the Matt Stafford days to take on Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide. Saban about the only constant in this battle between these two, SEC powerhouses at this point. So Blaine just Kirby. And Kirby, yeah, right. Kirby has been on the roster or on the staff over there at Alabama for what seemed like a decade before he ultimately, he did a great job. I guess we could start off there. He did a great job holding out for one of the better jobs in the country at Georgia because it's year in and year out. One of Saban's assistants gets picked off that staff for head coaching job opportunity. And, Kirby turned him down for years on end. To ultimately wait out basically Mark Richt's firing. And if you really know the backstory to all that, he really wasn't waiting it out. He kind of pushed him out, if you will. But there was some cantankerous people in the Georgia fandom about Mark Richt's tenure. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. Blaine, let's get into it right here off the top. Just what are your early thoughts about this football game? We were expected to have it in September. It's been moved back to October now due to all the COVID and all of the all SEC schedules. So what are your initial thoughts about this football game?
First, I'm just very thankful and hopeful that it happens. I mean, just as a football fan, just getting to see games like this, that's what you've come to love. And quite frankly, before this year, everybody in America took for granted, and now there's the real possibility that, we're still in debate. Everything looks like it could go smoothly right now, but hopefully the game gets here. But as far as the game itself, I mean, just two tremendous programs that have become very familiar with each other through, national championship and SEC championship. And then, of course, the two coaches being very close. And I think people like to play a lot of this Saban against Kirby. They're cut from the same cloth, and they are close. It's a very much mentor mentee type relationship. Now Kirby's kind of coming into his own a little bit, and I know people like to play up some of the comments that Saban made with Belichick about, guys leave my staff, and then they expect to take other guys. I think that's about several guys that he's had, not just about Kirby, But yeah, just looking forward to seeing two of probably the two most talented teams in the country face off.
Yeah, we're going to get into the Scott Cochran kind of dilemma of this a little bit later. But you may say he was talking about a lot of people. I found the timing of that quote very peculiar. It was fresh off of Scott Cochran leaving their staff to come over to Georgia and be a special teams coordinator. So timing and phrasing are often two very important things about what a coach ultimately says, because all these guys are very fluent in coach speak, and the two most fluent in coach speak are Kirby Smart and Nick Saban in the college ranks, in my opinion. So I thought the timing of that quote was very, very important about what his actual intentions of it was. And I think it was a shot across the stern at what, Kirby ultimately did there with Scott Cochran. But again, we'll get into that just a little bit later. Let's get into these top returners. And we'll start on the offensive side of the football. Road to Atlanta here. We'd like to give you the goods, if you will, by each of these opponents, starting with the returners. We'll get into the coordinators and whatnot, and then we'll give you some game scores and game predictions. But, hey, man, it's a loaded Alabama class or staff and roster as always, right? I mean, they've recruited as well as anybody in the country over the last decade and a half, it seems like, since Saban's reign has begun out there in Tuscaloosa. And offensively, man, there's going to be questions about the quarterback position, and we'll get into that as well. But they're pretty loaded, starting with their running back, Najee Harris, Blaine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's just a tremendous athlete. And a lot of people like to invoke, Georgia as RBU. Well, Alabama can stake that claim just as well. Mark Ingram. You got, Trent Richardson when he was there. I know he flamed out.
Drake.
Yeah, Kenyon Drake.
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry, who's the Russian, King Henry up in the NFL, the Russian king this past year. So obviously, it's a great tradition of running backs. Najee Harris is no different, a big physical athlete that gets downhill in a hurry, can do different things. They can use him to catch the ball in the backfield. So definitely they're going to be leaning on him with a what you would want to say tenuous quarterback situation this year, even if it's Mac Jones. If it is Mac Jones starting out, even him, he's got limited starting experience. So we'll see how things end up. But Najee Harris definitely going to be relied upon early. And it's going to be a shift for Alabama, because if you think about it, Brooks, they didn't run the ball with a whole ton of success the last 2 years while Tua has been there. They went to more of aerial attack. At times, that was the downfall to Alabama the last 2 seasons. They weren't able to run it when they needed to. So we'll have to see how that running game comes along for Alabama.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people in the NFL scouting world were actually pretty surprised to see Najee Harris return for his senior year in Tuscaloosa. He would have been probably a top 60, top 65 pick, would have fallen in line with guys like DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin. He would have been, and Cam Akers even was a top 60 pick in the NFL draft. So as much as people want to talk about how the running back position has been devalued in the NFL, well, they're still valuing them in terms of the NFL draft picks. They might not value them on their second and third contracts when they get there, but the draft capital is very, very invested, if you will, in the running back position. So very big surprise. And immediately once he was, elected to return, I think if you were to ask him to be 100% honest, I think he would probably tell you he was wishing he was getting ready for an NFL training camp right now, not having to deal with all this stuff that's going on in the college football ranks in terms of, trying to stay away from COVID and doing your best to isolate yourself. He would have still been doing that in the NFL ranks, but he'd have been getting paid to do so. And again, that's a whole other topic for discussion. Ultimately, he's going to be their bell cow. He's going to feed this guy a lot. I did see one quote, and again, it could be just coach speak, but when Steve Sarkisian spoke to the media, a couple weeks back, he mentioned that they were aiming to get multiple backs featured in this backfield just to keep Najee Harris a little fresher when they get to the fourth quarter. Again, that could be all coach speak, but then again, you're having a guy return to your program at the running back position for his senior year. The last thing you want to do is run that guy into the ground unless he is a Derrick Henry type of physical presence, which this kid isn't. Derrick Henry got 48 carries in an SEC championship game. He got 40 carries in a bowl game because he could handle that. He's 6'3", 235 pounds. We see him do that nowadays in the NFL as well. So you can do that with that type of back. I don't think they want to do that with Najee Harris, because nothing would look worse on that program than having their guy come back to their program and ultimately get hurt because of the misusage that they would have running him into the ground like that. Now, what he does have in front of him is probably one of the best offensive lines. I'm putting Alabama and Kentucky 1 and 1A, if you really look at it, and what they got returning up front. And they're led by a big joker named Alex Leatherwood, who's got a very strong potential to continue that line of tradition of first-round tackles being drafted out of the University of Alabama. And they go down the line. They returned 4 or 5 starters up front from a year ago. All they lost was I'm forgetting his name.
Jedrick Wills.
Yeah, Jedrick Wills. That's all they lost on that offensive line out there at right tackle. So, and you got to imagine that now with no left-hander at the quarterback position, that right tackle position becomes a little less valuable with not having to protect the quote-unquote blind side. You've already got that handled out there at Alex Leatherwood. Just quick thoughts on that offensive line, Blaine, and what they return.
Well, I mean, it's very much so. Again, you talk about the parallels with these two programs. Just very similar. Georgia cranking out high-profile linemen last year with 2 tackles in the first round. Well, Alabama's been doing it for years and years, like you said. Just Jedrick Wills being the most recent big-time offensive lineman for Alabama to go early, number 10 overall to the Cleveland Browns. So they're going to be well coached, but I do think you see a little bit. Even though yes, we're going to get into the debate of Bryce Young or Mac Jones, and they still have some talented receivers there, but you have to feel that there's going to be a little bit more of a shift back to a little bit more of the run game for Alabama. I just don't see them throwing the ball as much as they did a year ago. So, and I think that's more so to give those young quarterbacks and lean on the on the offensive line, just to kind of get things going, especially as they start off the year.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to get into the quarterback discussion, but I think before we get there, I think we need to talk about these wide receivers and weapons that they have at Alabama and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. And I don't think there's a 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position better than this in college football. And Devontae Smith coming back last year is another kind of like wow moment. It's almost a head scratcher moment in terms of, I spoke to NFL evaluators that thought he was a potential first round draft pick in that extremely talented wide receiver class last year. If Jalen Reagor is going in the first round, I can guarantee you Devontae Smith was going to get looks in those top 32 picks. So him coming back, you can't say enough about it. Now, the other guy, Jalen Waddle, man, we got to see what he could do in that Iron Bowl last year. He went for 200-plus yards. I love that young man's game. I think these two guys, just like last year, they had a guy go in the first round, two guys go in the first round in Ruggs and Judy. These two guys are going to turn around and go in the first round again, probably in this 2021 NFL draft class too. So whoever gets the nod at quarterback, and we think it's going to be Mac Jones to start the season, whoever is the starting quarterback against Georgia in this football game, they're going to have weapons. They're going to be able to throw the football, and they're going to be able to protect their quarterback as well. So I think Devontae Smith's one of the best double move route runners in the game of college football. So if you give this guy time, and you're going to give that quarterback time behind that offensive line, presumably, if you give this guy time, you're going to be able to get Devontae Smith open for explosive plays, which is something Georgia's really got to be worried about, especially with the tendency that Richard LeCounte has to maybe bite on some double moves every once in a while. So don't be shocked if you see Devontae Smith breaking for a 65, 70-yard touchdown because he got behind that defensive backfield group from Georgia. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just saying don't be surprised. Now, Jalen Waddle, a totally different type of wide receiver, a type of wide receiver that you can give the ball now, and he still might get 65, 70 yards and score because he's that explosive after the catch as well. So let's get into this quarterback discussion, Blaine. I don't know your take on Mac Jones. I know my take on Bryce Young, and I'm not so sold on Mac Jones for what he can be as a quarterback. Saw him miss a lot of throws in that bowl game they had against Michigan. I'm not so sold on it, and I am sold on Bryce Young. What's your thought on their quarterback battle they've got?
Well, Bryce Young has an absolute howitzer attached to his shoulder. I mean, he's just like his arm talent is off the charts. Of course, also he's a very good athlete as well. It's going to be very, very hard for them to hold off. But in typical Saban fashion, I wouldn't even be surprised to see Mac Jones have played well in those first 3 games. It comes to Georgia, and here comes another halftime switch situation. And then here Bryce Young comes in, and every Georgia fan will collectively hold their breath to see, I could see that situation playing out. But Mac Jones brings a rapport with Steve Sarkisian. He brings that leadership aspect that a true freshman, no matter how talented, has to learn. It has to be accumulated over time. That's why I think you could see the grumblings start in Tuscaloosa about Game 4, which that's where Georgia and Alabama meet up at. So
it's a very similar situation to what they had Tua Tagovailoa's freshman year, right? All you heard out of Tuscaloosa was about this left-handed freshman that they were just blown away with in practice. And ultimately, there came a point in time in that season, unfortunately for Georgia fans, it happened to be in the national championship game. There came a point in time where he was like, look, I can't do it anymore. I've got to see what this kid's got. I think something similar is going to happen with Bryce Young. And here's why I'm so sold on the kid. Look, the tape's great. The attributes are amazing. His ability to play off script and do all that great stuff is incredible. The arm talent's off the charts, right? We've already talked about that. I saw one play in the Adidas All-American game, and it was the first play of scrimmage that they had on offense, and I was sold on him. And what ultimately happened was he pre-snap identified cover 3 from the defense. He walked. Now, you can't do this in regular football, but he would already have hand signals to be able to do it. These are guys he's played with for 5 days out there in San Antonio. He walks out to the guy in the slot and tells him to run a seam. Just go straight down the field. They're playing cover 3. I'm going to hold the safety left. He did the exact same. He did exactly what he said, exactly the coverage that he thought was happening. He held the safety left, threw an absolute piss missile down the seam to the kid for a first play touchdown for about 70 yards. So the combination of his physical talents matched with the mental aspect of the football game that this kid's already possessed at such a young age, Bryce Young's going to win a Heisman. It's just a matter of when, in my opinion, at the University of Alabama, and who he's throwing to years 2 and 3 and 4, which they'll reload. They'll get some more guys in there after presumably Waddle and Smith leave this year. But this dude is legit. He's coming, and he's going to light up the SEC. It's just a matter of when. And I think another thing, and I don't know, it's an obvious, right? When you have a true freshman coming in, he early enrolled after the Adidas All-American game, was there the next day and didn't get spring practice. That certainly hurts this kid, just adapting to the speed of the game. I think it's something that we've kind of heard rumblings about over at Dogs Daily about Carson Beck. It's not that he's not talented. It's not that he doesn't look great. It's that he's probably struggling with the speed of the game right now. It's not that he's not picking up the offense. It's just that he hasn't gotten 1,000 reps against defenses that move that quickly. I think you're going to see something similar with Bryce Young, excuse me. The only difference is this kid, if he's confused, if he doesn't know the look he's getting, he could turn it into a scramble drill just like that. He's off, playing off script and throwing bombs on the run. I think that's something that's terrifying for defensive coordinators. And I think, again, ultimately, by week 4, I think you're going to see what Blaine just talked about. I think you're going to see Mac Jones play, and if he doesn't play well, Bryce Young's coming in after halftime, or he might even start the game, depending on how they start their first 3 weeks. Now, flip over to the defensive side of the football. Man, when I'm looking up and down this roster, I see a whole bunch of talent, but I see a whole bunch of guys that have struggled with injuries over the last couple of years, Blaine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about it. Anytime you lose the amount of players that Alabama does each year to the NFL, just a tremendous amount of loss each year. And, you're talking 10, 12, 15 guys drafted over a year. And then you're relying on a few guys to really step up the next year, and you have key losses like they had with Dylan Moses and Josh McMillan last year. Then, I mean, you find yourself in a hole. In Alabama at the linebacker position last year was decimated. I mean, they were playing a bunch of young guys. Saban lamented it week in and week out, telling talking to the media, things like that, telling them not to give him any more rat poison, all that kind of stuff. But he's talking about linebackers, linebacker depth, and as good as they've been in recruiting, it did hurt them last year, at those key positions. But and they lose on the back end, Trayvon Diggs, who's been just a solid guy for him the last couple of years. So it's going to be a adjustment for Alabama. But like you said, they have so much talent. I do think you'll see, especially, week 2, them facing a Jimbo Fisher coach team in Texas A&M. They will be tested. You will learn a lot about that Alabama defense in week 2, even though that's a home game for Alabama as well. I think you'll really learn a lot, because I think Jimbo Fisher, and a lot of people may not make this connection, Jimbo Fisher and Todd Monken are not so different in how they're going to approach an offensive philosophy. Georgia will learn a ton from that Texas A&M Alabama game. So, defensively, obviously they're going to be as talented as anybody in the country. But like you said, that uncertainty of guys coming back from injury, guys who didn't play a year ago, losing a bunch of guys to the NFL. It's that constant reloading process for Alabama, and with that comes teaching. And I think that's why people always wonder, when is Nick Saban going to hang it up? Well, I think when it comes down to it, Nick Saban enjoys teaching, and he's constantly getting that opportunity to teach at Alabama with these young kids that are talented and all the turnovers. So expect to see some growing pains early, and I'm really looking forward to watching that A&M game from Alabama.
Yeah, I think you hit on a good point there, especially with the way Jimbo likes to use split backs. Like, he runs 2 running backs into the formation a lot, and it's something that we at Dogs Daily expect to see a good bit this year. Look, Georgia's running back group is so deep and so talented that, similar to what they had in Cleveland last year, where you got 2 of the best backs in the NFL in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. As soon as Kareem Hunt was eligible to play week 8, he was in the lineup. They played 2 running backs a lot, and that's something you see Jimbo Fisher do at Texas A&M. And I don't know if you're going to see it from Georgia a ton early in the season, but you're definitely going to see it at some point. And I think Alabama, depending upon how they defend Jimbo's two-back set, I think might, determine ultimately what Georgia and Todd Monken ultimately end up using there. But you hit on it, man. These guys that are coming back from injury, they've kind of struggled with it year in and year out. You already hit on Dylan Moses and Josh McMillan. There's a guy named LeBrian Ray that has really struggled. Now, a national recruit, somebody that everybody wanted, has played year in and year out and has gotten an opportunity to play, earned starting roles as a sophomore, and was getting starting playing time. But it's a toe injury here. It's a lower body injury here. It's another foot injury, ankle injury here. The guy's only played a dozen games in his 3-year career at this point. So at what point does it become, the guy's just, got this bug, he's got the injury bug, he can't get rid of it. And what point is it, okay, maybe he's just injury riddled. Maybe it's just something that we should come to expect from him. I hope that's not the case because the guy's talent is through the roof. He is an absolute game changer when it comes to the defensive line position. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to be available, especially week 4. I mean, these injuries that he's had in his career have come early in the season. It hasn't been week 9, LeBron's down. No, it's been week 3 against South Carolina, LeBron's out for the year. So that's kind of what it's been throughout his history. I just wonder if it's going to continue. I hope it doesn't. I hope he's fully healthy. I hope he has a great season and goes on to a successful NFL career because I think he's going to be fun to watch, especially at the next level. A guy that's also going to be really fun to watch at the next level, Patrick Surtain. This is supposed to be the next DB, coming out of Alabama. That's supposed to be the truth. And he played really well last year. We'll just see what it looks like this year. They're talking about a 1-2 punch in terms of the SEC at the defensive back position in Patrick Surtain and Derek Stingley Jr. It's just all, preference on which one you think has a higher ceiling. I'm taking Stingley simply because he's younger, but Surtain, the ceiling's through the roof on this guy as well. I mean, when you come to expect this, right? You're talking about Alabama, you're going to have a talent-laden roster. It's just about how healthy are they, how experienced are they come week 4, and what they ultimately look like and how they react to what they're getting on the field from Georgia. Because I think one thing that they're going to see is that Georgia's going to hold all of their punches for this football game right here. Whatever they show against Arkansas, whatever they show against Auburn, whatever they show against Tennessee, it's going to be a small percentage of that full playbook that Todd Monken ultimately has. I think that's what we're going to be seeing October 17th. Now, on to these coordinators. Now, we don't have to spend a whole bunch of time here on the defensive coordinator because I think that's Nick Saban's defense. I think we can agree upon that. So much so that he's almost like Belichick in the sense that he never really awards defensive coordinator titles until somebody, quote unquote, earns it. I don't think he gave Kirby Smart a D coordinator title until like 3 years after he'd been calling defensive plays. Same thing with Brian Flores up there in New England before he left for the Miami head coaching job. He just doesn't anoint one because he's so heavily involved. But let's start with Steve Sarkisian, somebody here in the area that, Falcons fans in particular are really familiar with. What are your thoughts on the offense that he runs?
I mean, he's comfortable. Obviously, Saban has a lot of faith in him, with the big contract extension, and the pay raise and things like that. Obviously, Sarkisian knows how to orchestrate. I mean, who would have thought the year that Kiffin left and he stepped in for one game? I mean, just in that amount of time for Saban to say, okay, I trust you to call this in this amount of time. That's a lot of faith to put into a guy. And he's proven, even though he's had his personal struggles, with alcoholism and stuff like that, and Lord willing, he's fighting through all that stuff day in and day out. But from a pure football standpoint, you won't find a better offensive coordinator than Steve Sarkisian. I mean, he really is able to design plays that get guys who are really fast, like Alabama has on the perimeter, running wide open. Uses the screen game very well, the RPOs. So and Georgia fans won't like to hear this, but again, it's kind of where Georgia wants to go in that vein of what Alabama is doing. You just have to hope that Georgia has seen enough of it. If you're a Georgia fan, you just have to hope that Georgia's seen enough of it to kind of counteract that. But definitely Steve Sarkisian is, he's able to utilize a lot of different formations and shifts and that screen game and then create shots down the field.
Yeah, the only question I have about Alabama's offense this year is when and if they're going to make the decision at the quarterback position. I think that's the main thing. If you're an Alabama fan, I want to know as soon as possible who's this team? Whose team is this at the quarterback position? We know it's going to be Najee Harris's team with Mac Jones in there. I think your offense is extremely limited in terms of downfield production when you've got Mac Jones at the quarterback position. That's just my opinion. From what I've seen, I think he's going to miss a lot on Diggs. I mean, this offense is predicated. You saw it in Atlanta. They like to run 12, 15-yard digs, call them big boy digs. That it's a coverage zone beater at this point in that offense. And if you don't have enough arm strength and timing to rip that ball in there, you can't play quarterback in this system. And I think that might be something that Mac Jones ultimately struggles with moving forward into the season. And I think, they're going to have to make the decision. It's been something we've been talking about a lot tonight. And I think it's the main questioning point of this football team. Who's going to be playing quarterback? Same question you could ask about Georgia's football team. Let's get into the defensive coordinator real quick and Pete Golden. Now, we can be short and simple here. This guy's got a real deep background in defensive backs, and I think that's why Nick Saban loves him so much. Saban, a former defensive back guy himself, still helps coach the defensive backs at Alabama. Was at UTSA out there in Texas, and then jumped onto the staff in Alabama. He's been there about 3 years as a co-defensive coordinator, and recently got anointed the defensive coordinator position in February of 2019. Do you know much about Pete Golding there, Blaine?
I mean, just since he's arrived on Alabama, I wasn't following UTSA football very, very closely when he was over there. But, like you said, there's just so many parallels, much in the same vein of, a young Kirby Smart coming from Valdosta State to making his way to Georgia 1 year and then going to, LSU and following Saban to Miami and then to Alabama. I mean, Pete Golding, much in the same type of position. Like you said, a defensive back guy. Kirby was a defensive back guy. So there's trends here. Nick Saban goes with what he's familiar with and what he knows. He trusts Pete Golding. The question is how much, like you said, is he in control of? But definitely there's continuity there from the last couple of years. So you expect Alabama schematically to be as sound as anybody on the defensive side. But I do have my questions on that when we get a little bit later into our buy and sell period. But definitely, you're not going to find coordinators any better than Alabama has for sure on the offensive or defensive side.
All right, let's address the Scott Cochran issue, and then we'll get into our question about Jamie Newman. So the Scott Cochran thing, man, obviously everybody knows was the strength and conditioning coordinator over there, was basically the second face of their program in terms of the coaching staff. I don't know very many strength and conditioning coordinators that have commercials. This guy had a commercial during his time at Alabama. Nick Saban does commercials all the time. The second face of that program, I believe, and one of their better recruiters. When we talk to guys all the time that Georgia has been in a battle with for years with Alabama, dating back to their freshman, sophomore, and junior years, the number one guy they say that's recruiting them now at Georgia is Scott Cochran. He is dominating the state of Alabama in terms of going after targets. That guy is who they are sending after all of the Yellowhammer State products. So he has already turned around, a new leaf at Georgia in terms of energy and just the amount of attention he's given to recruits in that Georgia area, because that's what recruiting is. Let's be honest. It's, being resilient and constantly getting after these kids with good intentions. And I think that's what he's based off of, and that's what he is. Do you see any diminishments, weeks 8, 9, and 10? I know they did a great job with their staff. They've gone much more of an analytical approach, a database approach in the weight room out there in Alabama. Do you think there's any, lingering issues weeks 8, 9, and 10 in an all SEC schedule when you lose one of the best strength and conditioning coordinators to another team?
I mean, Nick Saban and the like are going to, deny it until they're blue in the face. This machine just keeps on rolling. But like you said, Scott Cochran is a special, not only coach, not only strength coordinator, but human being, like you said. Yeah. And anytime you lose a guy of that quality who was that loyal to the University of Alabama for that long, and like you said, was a marketable guy. He was a brand setter for Alabama with all of his sayings, with all of the social media stuff they did with him. So I do think that there will be, anytime you switch from one strength coordinator to another, there's going to be differences. Now, if you're an Alabama fan, maybe you're hoping that something does change in the injury
they've had a
process.
slew load of knee injuries over the last 4 or 5 years. That was the number one thing that was thrown into my mentions when he jumped over to Georgia was, hey, thank God he's gone. You know, they were scared to death he was going to leave, but as soon as he was gone, it was, oh, thank God, maybe our ACLs will be okay and intact. All right, our next, talking point we got here, and I think it's the main one for Georgia heading into this game. And I know we don't talk a ton about Georgia on road to Atlanta. We talk more about the opponent they're ultimately going to be playing. But, hey, man, this is what I call a prove it or move it game for Jamie Newman. This will be 4 weeks in. They're playing the number one team on their schedule, the biggest opponent on their schedule. If Jamie Newman doesn't look good to great in this football game, do you think Kirby takes a feather out of his protege's hat and plays the next guy in line that he knows is ultimately, super talented in JT Daniels? And I don't say that because I'm doubting Jamie. I think Jamie's going to be great at Georgia. But if it doesn't look great for the first 3 weeks, JT Daniels is fully healthy, fully cleared. We expect him to play and have a portion of this offense by week 4. Do you think we have a Tua and Jalen type of halftime switch at this Alabama game if Georgia is not moving the football?
I'm not so sure it'll be so cut and dry as that, because I think that there could be 2 quarterbacks playing even before that during the year. I think there could be multiple quarterbacks playing. I think JT Daniels is going to see the field before that Alabama game, honestly. Now,
but you're more talking about cleanup duty, right? You're not talking about run one guy out one series, run one guy out the next, are you? You don't think that's happening?
That's the question. Is it going to be mop-up duty, or is it going to be, it could even be the old Mark Richt, DJ Shockley approach when David Green was there, where he wanted to make sure that DJ Shockley had reps. So it wasn't a every other series deal, but you would see in key situations, DJ Shockley get a series to himself. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but let's just take JT out of the question for right now, because technically, according to Kirby Smart, he's not medically cleared. So we can't, even though Dog Nation, other people like that have reported it, early on, he's not medically cleared according to Kirby Smart. So right now you have to assume it is Jamie Newman. So what we're saying from that is, let's say Jamie Newman's job and it comes game 4 and Georgia has been able to run the ball effectively, move it through the air, their passing game. But I can see game 4 against Alabama be where Jamie Newman has 15 carries and does a lot of design quarterback runs, a lot of zone read stuff, maybe even some speed option stuff off the corner. I can see his legs becoming a big factor in this game, especially against a linebacking core and people on the edge who aren't the most experienced in the world for Alabama.
I like that take, Blaine. I like it so much. In my preview article in a couple of weeks when Georgia plays Alabama, I'm going to be putting it in there. Look out for Jamie Newman, 15 carries. And I'm going to quote Blaine Gilmer on Road to Atlanta from back on September 1st. I like that a lot. All right, let's get into our game predictions. I'll start. Look, if and when Georgia plays them later in the year, a la the SEC championship game, I'm taking Georgia in that one. I don't think that Georgia has everything cleared up and ready to go for this Alabama game week 4, because there are a whole bunch of questions. I mean, and Barrett Sallee hit on it today on CBS Sports, and a lot of our readers, were bashing him. But here's the deal. He brought up several warranted questions that we've talked about on Dogs Daily. There are questions at wide receiver, especially now with Don Blaylock going down. Extremely talented. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. Extremely talented. Not a lot of experience, and experience in the SEC is kind of important. Still don't know what the quarterback situation is going to look like. We just got done talking about it for 5 minutes. We don't know who's going to be the starter, and we don't know how good they're going to be. All right? They replaced 4 starters on the offensive line. People are going to tell me that Ben Cleveland was starting. When Cade Mays was healthy, Ben Cleveland was not starting. Cade Mays was starting last year at the guard position at right guard. So they lost 4 starters last year. Extremely talented coming back, but completely inexperienced. All right? Running back position, DeAndre Swift, one of the best running backs in the country last year, gone. Zamir White's looking like Zamir White. He's getting back to what he was, but still kind of a question mark. We don't know what it's ultimately going to look like in 2020. So I think all of those questions, if they end up being checks on the balance sheet, if they end up looking like net positives by week 4, then Georgia's going to play a good game, possibly come out with the win. I don't think all of those questions are answered by week 4. This is a football team that probably takes week 5, week 6, week 7 before they look like the best version of themselves. And for that reason, I'm taking Alabama in this football game. 34-27 is my prediction.
If I was Lee Corso on College Game Day,
are you not so fast at me?
I hold up my pen and say not so fast, because I'm telling you right now, first of all, I appreciate every take, man. But to say that Ben Cleveland is not a returning bonus, there was not a offensive lineman playing better for the University of Georgia in 2017 when they made their national championship run.
We're talking 3 years ago.
I don't care.
3 years ago. I know he's a good football player. Don't get me wrong. He is a starter at every other SEC program. He's going to be a starter this year. But he was rotating in and out with another starter last year in Cade Mays. Those are facts.
He was hurt. I mean, he was hurt. Okay. If he's healthy, the monster among men is starting. He looks like Braun Strowman from the WWE. I mean, he does. Huge. But you talk about, I think if it's kind of the old saying, if not now, when? This is, and by all measures, I'm just talking about talent. I'm not talking about experience. I'm not talking about the senior leadership factor that Nick Chubb and Sony Michel brought back in that. This is the most talented team that Kirby Smart has ever had.
Look at Blaine over there pounding the table.
I like
it, man. Give me the score prediction. Let's go.
I'm going to say Georgia beats Alabama 24-21, and Alabama misses a field goal at the end and breaks the Tide fans' hearts there at the end.
This is a warranted comment from Caleb right here. He doesn't think Bama's scoring 30 on the Dogs without Ruggs, Judy, and Tua. Look, one thing you guys, and I say you guys, one thing people got to understand is Georgia's defense is going to be great this year, but they're going to be on the field a lot more. Okay, they're going to score faster on offense. They're going to turn the ball over a little bit more. They're going to have 3 and outs at a faster clip, not at a higher rate, but they're going to have them in a faster clip, meaning they're not going to be run on first down, run on second down, run on third down. Oh, crap, it's 4th and 2. Let's punt. And we ran a minute and a half off the clock. That's not what it's going to be this year when they go 3 and out. When they go 3 and out this year, it's going to be run on first down, 2 passes in a row, look up, we run 35 seconds off the clock, and now we got to punt the football back to the other defense or the other offense, and our defense has only been on the sideline for 2 minutes of real time. So they're going to give up a little bit more points this year, but I do think you're right. I think Alabama may struggle to put up 30 points. I'm predicting them 34-27 just because predictions and score predictions aren't really the key here. The key is I'm picking Alabama to win this football game and Georgia in the SEC championship game to win. And Blaine's picking Georgia in Tuscaloosa. We'll get his prediction of the SEC championship game maybe a little later on down the road. All right.
I'm not ready for that one yet.
Yeah, not ready for that one. Let's hit some of these comments before we get into our buys. I'll take Jamie in the defense over Mac Jones and their defense all day. Warranted comment. Again, UGA recruiting. We got Caleb, who's a Dog fan. All very warranted, and all of your comments are welcome here. But they come with a little grain of salt. All right, may come down to special teams. I think that's a good point as well. At which point, hey, both kickers are unproven at this point between Alabama and Georgia. Let's get into stock options, Blaine. We'll start with you. What are you buying in this football game? If you got to load some stock up, what are you putting it in?
I'm buying the empty Bryant-Denny Stadium does in Alabama. I think that is a huge loss of momentum. I think you're going to see anytime throughout the whole SEC this year and across the country, that home field advantage is just not going to be there, except for noon games, noon kickoffs, and those kind of things where it's just travel. I don't see the home field advantage being that big of a deal. I think that helps Georgia's quarterbacks, it not being so unbearably loud, them being able to think a little bit clearer, get things going. I'm buying that the lack of crowd at Alabama plays a difference in this one.
All right, I'm buying the Bama offensive line. This really went into my prediction for them to win this football game. I think Bama's offensive line and maybe Kentucky are about the only two units in the SEC that can handle what Georgia's going to throw at them for 4 quarters. And I think I'm not going to say they're going to manhandle them, but I think they can control the line of scrimmage enough to allow that offense to move the ball down the field. Look, Georgia stopped the run really, really, really well during Kirby Smart's era and tenure in Georgia. This might be the exception. If Najee Harris goes off for 110 yards, I'm not saying he's going off for 180, but if he goes off for 110 and 2 scores, don't be surprised, is all I'm going to say, because this offensive line is the truth from Alabama. They'll have several draft picks in the near future. All right, Blaine, what are you selling in this football game?
I'm selling that the projected top 10 pick, Patrick Surtain, is able to handle George Pickens. I think George Pickens is, if Patrick Surtain's a future top 10 pick, George Pickens is a future maybe top 5 pick. They don't make them like George Pickens. I'm telling you, he's the size, the speed, the dexterity, it's off the charts. And I definitely think one thing that Jamie Newman is off the charts at, even at Wake Forest, was his ability and ball placement on deep balls. And when in doubt, throw it deep to pick. And we're going to see. It's going to be the matchup between Surtain and Pickens. But I'm selling the fact that Surtain's going to be able to hold Pickens down the whole game.
Yeah, Jamie Newman, I believe, was number 2 in the country last year in completion percentage of balls thrown 25 air yards or more.
Who was that guy?
Only Joe Burrow,
Burrow,
who is pretty daggum good. And we'll see what he can do at Cincinnati with no offensive line up there this year. But all right, my sell to close the night out. I'm selling that Bama defense for the time being. We don't know. We don't know who's going to be healthy. We don't know how deep they are. All we know is the big names that we hear are coming back from injuries, but they're coming back from injuries. I mean, you can't say the same thing about Georgia's defense. Georgia's defense is loaded, and there's nobody on that defense that struggled with injuries over the last couple of years. They're, for the most part, all healthy. All right, we know Dominic Blaylock went down last week, but other than that roster is completely healthy. All right, and the other thing we got to worry about is the full depth of the defense. I don't know how deep Georgia or Alabama is on that defensive line front and that linebackers group when it comes to second, third, fourth stringers, because in the times of COVID, there is nothing more important than depth. And we're talking about week 4. I know everybody's going to be relatively healthy week 1 when it comes to this COVID stuff. Who's to say it might not pop up week 4? Who's to say it might not pop up week 3? Those are the types of things you've got to worry about. And at Georgia, I don't think you really do, because Georgia's offensive or outside linebackers group goes 7 deep with guys that can play just about anywhere. Georgia's defensive line group, they got about 7 guys that can play just about anywhere. Georgia's linebacking group, they only play 2 in the inside linebacker spot. They got about 4 of them that are legit. Defensive back group, the only question I would have is at safety. If some of them safeties go down between Richard Count and Lewis Cine, I'd be pretty concerned. But other than that, I'm selling Bama's defense for the time being. We'll see what it ultimately looks like moving forward. Blaine, any final thoughts before we head out?
I just can't wait for it to get here. It's going to be the event of the year.
It's a good point here from Caleb. Surtain last year got the benefit of Xavier McKinney covering a lot of that field behind him. Doesn't have that this year. So I think that's a good comment to end it on. I think that's a very good point to Blaine's point about him buying that George Pickens is going to roast Patrick Surtain up, which I'm looking forward to see. I don't know if Todd Monken's going to allow defenses to double team George Pickens. I really don't. I think he is good enough schematically. We saw it in Tampa Bay. They couldn't double team
DeJean Jackson.
Mike from Texas A&M, Mike Evans. They couldn't double team Mike Evans because he was so good schematically that he would put him in positions to win in one-on-one situations. I think they'll do the same thing with George Pickens this year. Plus, I think some of them young wide receivers they're going to be seeing this year, they're going to be too damn good. If you put George Pickens and Jermaine Burton on one side of the field and you decide to double team George Pickens, you are going to get torched. I'm telling you that right now. We already know. Everybody knows Brooks Austin is all over Jermaine Burton. I love him. I think he's going to be great. Or Kyrus Jackson. Or Demetrius Robinson.
So let's say then people want to say, okay, we're going to put our smaller, less, adept cover guy into the boundary and go against a big bodied Justin Robinson over there. You know, how that works out in Georgia's favor, you know, the more possession guy. So there's a lot of options.
Absolutely. Let's wrap it up. Next week, we will be back with Kentucky. Is that correct? I think I got that schedule memorized at this point. Next week, we will be back with Kentucky's preview. I know it's not highly as anticipated as Alabama's was. Hope you guys enjoyed tonight's show. Before we let you go, we got to let you know that all this will be available on dogsdaily.com tomorrow morning. If you missed any of tonight's show, another little sneak peek for you. It's 10 o'clock. I haven't broke into the film yet, so I'm going to be up till about 2 a.m. But I'm getting into Nakobe Dean tonight. I'm getting into that highlight breakdown and that film breakdown tonight on my YouTube page. It will be up in the morning. If all things work my way. You know, sometimes I got technical failures. But other than that, it will be up over there. So hope you guys take the time to read and watch that. For Blaine Gilmer, I'm Brooks Austin. This has been The Road to Atlanta. We will see you next week.